In this pod, we'll find out about the Guyanese-British poet Grace Nicols. Grace Nicols grew up in a small village in Guyana, a Caribbean country in South America. Her father was a head teacher and encouraged her to recite poetry, introducing her to poets like Keats, Wordsworth, and Shakespeare at an early age. In the poem Childhood, Nicols writes, "My childhood was a watershed of sunlight and strange recurring mysteries." The culture and landscape of her childhood home made a strong impact on her and would become a recurring theme in her poetry. As a teenager, Nicols wanted to become a novelist, but when she moved to England in 1977 at the age of 27, she began to write poetry. She went on to publish her first poetry collection, I Is a Long-Memoried Woman, in 1983, and since then has written poetry collections for children and adults, including the fabulously titled Lazy Thoughts of a Lazy Woman. Nicols describes her writing as a way of participating in the world and in the struggle for keeping language and the human spirit alive. Nichols's poems combine Creole, the dialect of Guyana, and other Caribbean islands with Standard English. Having both of these languages to draw on excites her as a poet. The blending of language giving her poems a richness of rhythm and rhyme. She writes her poetry to be read aloud, stating that, "You have to write for the ear and hear the music." She has always considered the environment in her work and sees it as the element that connects all humans. In the poem Hurricane Hits England, Nicols explores feeling disconnected from both the place of her birth and the country she now lives in. The familiarity of a hurricane, a more frequent occurrence in the Caribbean, somehow restores that sense of belonging and strengthens her connection to England as home, an idea which is emphasized by her affirmative use of repetition in the poem's final line, "The earth is the earth is the earth." Nicols also uses repetition to great effect in her poem Atlantic. Atlantic now sleeping in the distance, peaceful as a dog glossed by the morning sun. Atlantic, now churning up an army of wild horses, white manes threatening a biblical leaping, or brooding on the ships that bruised your memory. This poem has an oral quality that comes from Nichols's practice of reading her poems aloud as she composes them. She does this to get a sense of the different sounds and music of the words and to stay in tune with the feeling of orality. Another literary technique that Nicols often employs is personification. For example, in the poem Sun is Laughing, Nicols imagines the sun as a moody and sullen teenager writing, "Then, without any warning, as if she was suddenly bored, sun slammed the sky window closed, plunging the whole world into grayness once more." Nicols writes her poems out by hand and will redraft them several times before typing them up. She says, "There are some poems that come almost as gifts and you don't change a thing, but that doesn't happen often." Nicols believes that poetry can help you to see the world with new eyes, as each poem is like a freshly created little universe, at the same time awakening you to the power and rhythm of language. Her advice to young poets is to read widely so that they can pick up ideas, discover different rhythms, and different ways of writing.